Do you want a weekly dose of energy and marketing tips to grow your business? Then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Lisa Pezik Show, a podcast that empowers entrepreneurs to heal and be heard, the permission to pivot, and the tools to design a life you love.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Lisa Pezik Show. Oh, I'm so excited about this conversation today because shit is about to get real. Talking about the emotional side of entrepreneurship. And, Amber, my guest today, who I can't wait to tell you all about her and what she's going to be diving into. We were having a little pre-podcast, hit the record button conversation. And we were talking about, how the soft skills are not actually that soft when it comes to what we're going to be talking about today. It's hard. Vulnerability, leadership, managing your team, hiring, firing, not writing that email when you're ticked off and totally in your right to blast somebody, honoring your integrity and the way you're showing up in the world. That is hard. And that entrepreneurship is not always rainbows and butterflies and sunshine. And sometimes when you see people only putting that out, you start to go, what's wrong with me? I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not making enough money. My company is not da-da-da-da-da. My business is not la-la-la-la. Insert whatever scarcity thing. And then some days you just want to blow it all up and not do this at all. Right? I think we've all had that moment where we're like, I should just go back and get a job because it's so much easier. And then you're like, oh my God, no, it's not. Okay, I didn't mean that. I take it back. So how do we manage all of that? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So Amber, welcome. So excited to have you here with me today.
I'm beyond excited to be here. I was like, I love the energy.
We're built-in people. We are waking them up. Real talk and giving them tools and strategies to go do something different to get a better result.
Absolutely.
So about Amber Hawley is a licensed therapist and lifestyle strategist who works with entrepreneurial individuals and couples with the personal side of business. She's the owner of a group therapy practice in Silicon Valley, host of the My Biz Bestie podcast, wife, mom of 3 kids, damn girl, and Marvel movie super fan. Hell yeah. Amber originally worked in the tech industry, but her love for people led her to pursue a career where meaningful relationships are at the center of everything that she does. Yes. So how did you get into being the person that takes on this emotional side of business and entrepreneurship? What led you to this kind of work?
Well, before becoming a therapist, because I worked in the .com world, so I was in like marketing and operations and really, loved that. And I had, like most 27-year-olds, my existential crisis. And I was like, there's more, there's something else. And that's when I ended up going back to school, becoming a licensed therapist and then doing the therapy thing. So, but interestingly, once I became licensed as a therapist and started my own practice, then it's like bringing back the two worlds and realizing like growing a business, there's so much to it, right? You need to know the tools and the strategies and all of the, like legal stuff. But then there's also all of this emotional stuff that impacts your ability to grow or manage people or just deal with things. And more, now I've had that business for 10 years. As I worked with people, because being in Silicon Valley, I'd work with a lot of business owners or startup CEOs or, professionals like lawyers and doctors. And realizing like, there's just so much that we never really talk about. I mean, the closest I think we get is talking about mindset, right? But then there's all this other stuff that happens. And I found myself going through the same things, like having loss or trauma while you're trying to simultaneously run a business that supports your family, or, going through burnout. So there's just so many pieces that impact our ability to show up in our businesses and even the choices we make in our businesses. And so to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I can blend all of my favorite things together and really help people.
Yeah. And that's such when you hear it, you think it's a huge switch to go from the tech, world to the therapy world, but we're all human beings in whatever role this is that we're in. So it does cross over. I think a lot of times in my own life, in the past with my business and our company, when I've wanted to blow it up and just start all over and maybe like go get a job, has been the time where I felt burnt out or I felt overwhelmed. And it was because I was saying yes to all the wrong things, to all the wrong people. I was doing too much myself. I was overworked. Like I was literally overworking myself to death. And I was in this hustle, grind, more, till literally I was like, I can't do this anymore. And it made me realize that I was fully in control to make a different choice and change it. But is that the norm? Like, why do most people get burnt out and get stressed out in their business?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're talking about is probably the biggest one, right? Either like feeling that the only way to achieve something is to be hustling, like go 24/7. And especially if you're also not, or it's outsourcing, right? You need to manage and control everything. There's like so many things that happen. But I also see a lot of people who are, maybe they're teetering. Maybe it's not like full tilt, like Gary V hustle, but it's like, it's their version. I mean, because I would say that was me. I'm a very type A, go. I have ADHD. Like I just love, to do too many things. Or I used to say all the things, but now I'm like, no, that's too many things. But I think a lot of people are in that space where it's not that full tilt Gary V stuff, but that they're doing that. And then something else happens that impacts their bandwidth, whether that's a chronic illness or, like I said, loss in the family, or a huge shift even in their business, or maybe their marriage is falling apart, like so many different things can happen. And it's like, if you're living on the edge, there's no buffer for you to like take care of yourself and be doing the healthy things for yourself to make it sustainable. And so that's where it's like, for me, my messaging is really coming back to sustainability. And of course, like most people, where do we get our messaging is because I needed to learn that like deeply, like deeply needed to learn that. And so it's like what you said is very, very common though.
Yeah. And how do you determine whether hopefully people aren't hitting rock bottom and they're not getting burnt out, but I mean, if they are, they aren't, like, how do you then pick yourself back up and determine what are the priorities and what are the things that I need to be doing? And then what should I be delegating?
Yeah, I guess it depends like what level you're at. This is like that annoying therapist answer. Like, it depends. Who wants to hear that? No, I never do. But I think there are some times where you are so in the thick of it that you can't see it. And so you need somebody outside of you, whether that's people in your life telling you like, hey, you're not showing up for me, or like, I'm worried about your health, or like some major health thing happens, right? That's their wake up call. Like thinking about like Ariana Huffington, like that was her wake up call, hitting her head. And, or, so sometimes you need something external to kind of help you. And a lot of people do, because like, it's hard when you're, working in your business and you have those blinders on to be able to kind of like be able to stop, take that breath and switch it up. But sometimes I think there are some signs of like, if you're always feeling exhausted, if you're starting to feel like you're dreading like major parts, or you're not dealing with major parts of your business, that might be a sign. I think there are a whole bunch of different signs. Because when I think back to my first like major bout of burnout, I was seeing clients and I love seeing my clients. And so I would have so much energy. I was excited to see them. I loved, working with them. So I thought, well, I'm not burnt out, because you're supposed to start feeling like compassion fatigue when you are burnt out. Right. And so I was thinking, well, no, this isn't what's going on. And then I realized like, but I wasn't even like billing people. Like I was avoiding all of like this administrative stuff because that's the part I hate, right? It's like so boring and shitty and I don't like it. And so I was avoiding that. And then the other sign too was like, do you give everything to your business? And then when you come home, if for family or friends or your children or, whatever, do you have nothing left to give? And so you're extra irritable and, there can be a myriad of signs like that. But I think like starting to pay attention to that. And I think even the idea of, I need to stop and really prioritize. And if you're like, nope, I can't, there's no time to prioritize. There's no time to stop. I can't take a break. I have to. I think when you're constantly telling yourself, I have to, that's a sign of like, you need to stop. You need to take that deep breath and you need to reevaluate.
Yeah. I love what you're saying about how burnout sometimes isn't necessarily doing too many things. It's doing the things that you don't want to do, or the thing, like you're doing too many of the things that you don't want to do.
Yes.
And now in this day and age, it's so easy to hire someone to do, like whether it's the bookkeeping or just whatever it is that you don't want to do. That's where our company comes in with the copywriting and the digital marketing and the social media and the, all of that. Like we have VAs, we have all sorts of people, like even our own business, VAs that help us. And it's like, there are so many people, the project managers, like there are people that are so happy to do all the things in your business that you don't want to do. Even on the personal side, we used to have a student who used to come in. She loved laundry. Like we initially hired her to come and weed the garden. And we were like, is there anything else? Like, she's like, I'm looking for more hours and more work. And we're like, is there anything else that like, that you want to do while you're here? And she's like, I love folding laundry. I'm like, who are you? Like,
exactly.
Loved. I'm like, I hate laundry so much. Like there's not an ounce in my body that goes, I want to go fold that laundry in that basket today. Like there are people that will gladly do the things that you absolutely hate, but you have to be willing to let go of that control and pay them a lot of times.
Exactly. I know the laundry thing. I could just live out of my laundry basket. Like I would rather clean a toilet than fold laundry. I don't know why. It's just like monotonous and I hate it. I feel like such an adult when I do it, but ultimately one day that is my goal to let go of laundry and have somebody else be doing it.
And it's so sad when you're college students that actually go to college and then get like real jobs and then they don't want to do your laundry anymore.
I know that's the hard part about hiring, right? Because most people eventually leave for especially jobs like that. But that's the thing where I realized, and this is so ingrained in me now that, I have 3 businesses. And what I learned in this one is I was like, I'm going to hire well before like it even makes sense, because so I wasn't doing all that administrative stuff. And I kept feeling like, well, I can't. And I hear this from so many clients, right? I can't afford to hire somebody, or, oh, that's an expenditure. I now realize like having the right kind of assistant, 100%. They may not be revenue generating, but they actually will make you money because it does free you up to do the things that you're like great at and selling more and making it easier, and you feel less stressed. You have more space. Like I believe it's so deep in my bones now that I don't even hesitate. Whereas, when you're beginning or even, a few years in, it's hard to take that investment. It's scary, right? Like, especially if you're somebody who has a high need for security, that's what I would say, somebody who feels like I need to have a lot of savings and I need a lot of profit margin and I feel nervous about taking risks. Like if you're somebody like that, it's even harder, but 100% hiring people is, to me, the most beneficial thing you can do for your business and your mental health.
Oh my gosh. That is when our agency and our business like 10x our income. Was when
100%.
We hired VAs, we hired project managers, we hired more people for our team. We hired the lady that was coming to do the garden and the laundry. Like, so my mentor, Bo Eason, he made us do an exercise called the never do again list. And you couldn't
I like that
judgment, but you literally had to just write, like, what are the things if the world was amazing and you lived in utopia and it was perfect, like, what are the things you would never do again? And for me, it was like laundry. It was like the first thing on top of my list, you know? And like one of his that he was sharing was like, he doesn't like to talk on the phone. Like he's like, that's not productive for me. Like, I'm not getting on the phone and calling people. Like, I'm never answering the phone. He's like, now granted, he's like, I'll talk to my 98-year-old mother. Like, of course I'm going to talk to her on the phone. Right. But like for business, like he's like, there's just different ways, or someone else can talk on the phone and then relay to me the information and I can make a decision. Like, he's like, I just hate talking on the phone. So I thought that was so interesting to make this like now, and that's where it came up for us. I was like, I don't want to garden. I don't want to do laundry. I don't want to write my social media posts. I don't want to do my own email. Like, I'll do the content, but I don't want to set up my own weekly emails. And it was just all these things. And then the coolest part was, when I actually looked at it, I was like, I don't need like 30 people. Like in my own mind, like I was like, oh my God, this is going to be so expensive because I have to hire like 20 people. I was like, oh, I need like 3 people to do like 10 things. Like, I'm like, it's not. Exactly. So I think we talk ourselves out of, getting help, and we think it's going to cost us all this money and all this, or, the other piece I've heard people say, but then I have to train them. Yes. Like, what's your take on when people, well, I can hire help, but then I have to take all this time to train them how to do it.
Yeah. Yes. And that I hear it too, that's the barrier. But again, it's like understanding you can have this small investment of time initially. Now it can feel like a lot, but then all of a sudden it just frees up all of this time, right? So it's like in anything, you invested in something so that in the long run, it pays off for you. And I think that the more you do hiring and kind of optimize like your systems and training people and how you onboard them. And frankly, you could even hire a consultant to help you with that. Like, you don't have to recreate the wheel, right? But I know, and I think some of that it can be perfectionism and like letting go of things. It can be this idea of no one's going to do it as good as me, which is true. And I will say that was one of the hard things, is like letting go and knowing like people are making these mistakes that you wouldn't make, but the like cost benefit of that, like, but you can't possibly do it all, right? Like, there's just that's not sustainable. And so I get it. And I have had every frustration. I'm pretty honest about like my hiring frustrations, where I have been betrayed, bamboozled, screwed over by so many people, because that's part of the process. It's like dating, right? Like, you just have to go out there and like, it's hard and you just have to regroup. But when you find those people, and then I ended up finding people who were so much better at what I was doing, than I did. And so like, I just think it's absolutely worth it. You kind of have to let go of that and say, okay, yes, I'm going to spend some time here that I actually have to like concertedly spend time with somebody, teach them, onboard them. But in a very short time, that all of a sudden it's like you have all of this time back. Right?
Yes. I think you bring up such a good point that people don't always talk about, is that it's normal to go through several people sometimes. Now, you might get lucky and find the unicorn on the first try. We did. Our Facebook ads expert guy has been with us for like 8 years, and he's fantastic. And he's the first person we found. But like, we're on like our 6th copywriter. I'm on my 5th or 6th VA. And I got on a call with someone and she was like, oh yeah, that's just the VA world. Like, she's like, I've been through 8 VAs. And I was like, really? Like, I thought it was like, and she's like, oh, no. Cause I was explaining how we need a VA who's like, not just tasky, who like understands like where our company is going, and relationship building and communication and excellence are like really important to us, and how it's the customer service and like how we handle people is really important. So we need a VA that like gets that and understands that our company is all about compassion and empathy and all of that. Right. And she's like, oh yeah. Like, it's so hard to find somebody who gets all of that. And And I'm like, I thought I was the only one with like this bad experience. And like, it was so validating to me to hear that other people, even having you say that, where you're like, I've been screwed over, I've been this, I've been that, us too. And you rally from it and you learn from it. But I think that can maybe be a roadblock. That's why people go, well, I just have to do it myself. Or no,
exactly. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. I'm just going to do it myself. And so, and yeah, that's where I always think of this, like, this is the benefit of being a therapist, is like, I get to hear all the inner stuff that people deal with. Right. And so when something happens, like, everyone feels that way. Even I'm like, oh, what is wrong with me? Like, this always happens to me. It's actually still an ongoing joke between me and my operations manager, where like, she's like, oh, Amber, only you, like, the shit that happens to me. You're like, what the hell? And I could believe that it's literally like the universe is against me and that I'm the only one. But I hear it from so many people. I'm like, hey, I know this is the experience. And I know, like, the more you're out there, if you're hiring more people, you're going to experience it a little bit more, right? Like, so sometimes people get kind of smug, like, oh, I hired somebody and they're so great. And I'm like, oh, well, that means you were the best boss. No, it just means you got lucky. So that's great. And you could have good systems, but just realize if you haven't been screwed over yet, like, it can still happen. So you just still have to, it's so a part of the process. But yeah, I don't think we talk about it a lot. And because people feel like, oh, they left because I'm a bad manager or a bad leader, or, I didn't have my stuff together in my business. And it's like, no, it's not that. This just is very normal. And I feel like, especially this last year with this hiring crisis, I mean, I think people now are starting to really recognize that this isn't happening to you because you're a bad business owner. This is happening to everyone, right? Like, this struggle in hiring. So in that way, I think there's this shared experience that is making people feel a little more like, okay, it's not just me. I mean, it still sucks.
Yeah.
Trust, it still sucks, but just understand it's not just you.
Yeah. And that, I think, this last couple of years has shown us that communication is just so important, because you have no idea what is going on in someone's home, in their life, the silent battles there, whether it's a mental health or like a coping thing, or it might even be a logistical, like, we even had somebody, they're like 3 kids, like, they're like, I have my 3 kids at home while I'm trying to run my business, I'm only available for these hours because I gotta get Johnny to this and Jimmy to that and Jane on this, and they're all schooling and they all need me and they all need food and snacks. And like, sometimes it's just, you have to understand where people are at, and you have to have that open line of communication. And I mean, that's always the biggest thing for our company, is we're like, we don't know, like, we can't come up with a solution together if we don't know what's going on with you on your end. No, you don't have to share your personal stuff with me if you don't want to. Right. But I am a kind, empathetic human being, and I want you to be okay and me to be okay, and do, that communication is important. And I think we forget that it's not just about getting the work done. It's about how you work together and what feels safe and good for everyone and what's manageable for everyone. I think that's a lot. Mm-hmm.
And I think making space for those conversations, not expecting employees or contractors or whoever that to come to you and let you know that stuff, you have to make space for that conversation, because, people can feel like, oh, if I talk to you about this, or my boss or whatever, like, then I'm going to be fired, or they're going to start looking at me a different way. And certainly if anybody's had experience in corporate culture, like, that does happen sometimes. Right. But I think when you're an empathetic person and you have a connection with people, making that space to let them know, then there's a trust there. But you need to let them know it's okay to share these things, kind of normalize it, and share even what you're going through. And again, it doesn't have to be in every detail, but normalizing for them what's going on so that you can hear back from them. Because I can remember even years ago having, because I have other therapists that work for me, and having this therapist who I just thought was like, she's a rock star, amazing, clinically just fantastic. And then all of a sudden it was just like this, like, quick decline. And and then some stuff happened, bad choices were made. And so, we had to have the conversation about moving on. And then she shared with me all of this stuff that had been going on with her that she never talked to me about, and acknowledged, I should have talked to you because like you are you've always been kind and generous and like, but she was so scared to and so overwhelmed. And I was like, I was sad that that didn't happen, because then by that point it was too far gone. Right. But it was like understanding I need to make that space for people, that so that it's okay to talk about these things, because people, this is kind of like when I do couples counseling, people, when things are good, like no one wants to rock the boat. And when they're struggling, like sometimes they're too emotional to even talk about it. And they just feel like they're going to do it badly. Right. So it's like, there's never a good time unless you actually make that space.
Yeah. And it makes me think like a question, like, what's my part in this? Like anytime things don't go right, it's so easy to go, wow, the copywriter didn't, they were 3 weeks late on the copy, or the, design team didn't pay attention to da, 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 da. I told them 10 times. And, that used to be my frustration. And now I'm like, okay, time out. We had an issue. We had a breakdown. What's my part in this? Where could I? And sometimes it's like, oh no, I did. Like you said, sometimes you have to let people go because you're like, oh no, I did. I made it very clear. We had a bunch of conversations, but sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I wasn't very clear when I said I wanted it this way. Or, maybe I was a little bit dismissive when that person was trying to share something with me, or, because I was in between, I shouldn't take calls when I'm in between 5 different things and I have to relieve that space and time. Like, I think when you start to realize you have a responsibility,
yes,
you have a part in it, like a relationship, like a partnership, like a marriage, it's 50-50. What's your part in it and how could you make it better? And I love that reflection that you shared around that experience. Really it's about energy management too, right? That's why we want to get the right people. Like, why is energy management so important, especially nowadays with the culture and the world?
Yeah. And I think it's one of the most important things, because to me, that's the culmination of understanding like what's on your plate, what are your obligations and commitments, what is the work that you're expecting yourself or people expect you to do for them, and understanding all of this emotional stuff and all of, how life is happening, how that's all interacting, how you're taking care of yourself. And I think we really minimize the impact of like holding on to these, high expectations or stresses, or not taking care of ourselves and working ourselves to the bone. Like having these extra things like just linger in the back of our mind exhaust us. Right. Yeah. And that's part of burnout. It's when you're in burnout, like when you're trying to actively work to stay healthy and not be in burnout, it's not that you can't do things. I know people who still do a lot of work, but they know themselves really well. They know what their limit is, because everybody's limit's different. Right.
Yes.
And then understanding like what they need, how they need to take care of themselves to be at that place. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think to realize like we shouldn't always run at 100 miles per hour. Like sometimes we need to bring it back a little bit. Right.
Yes.
So it's, I hadn't thought of this before, but just as I said that, because I like in 2002, I did the Honolulu Marathon. I am not a runner. I'm just going to put that out there. I did it to raise money for charity, and it was Honolulu, but the training that I did with this like guru marathon guy, but it was this huge group training. It was like team in training, but it wasn't team in training. Their whole thing was even the fastest people, they would run for a period of time and then walk. And even the fastest people. So us slow pokes would have more walking than running. And the fastest, they might have like, I'm just going to say 9 minutes of running and then 1 minute of walking, 9 minutes of running.
Right. People don't know that everybody walks during a marathon at one point or another.
Exactly. And the people who don't know that and didn't, by the way, I saw super fit, amazing people that I passed by as they were collapsing because of cramps, or they just couldn't keep going. And I was like, it took me forever and my feet were miserable, but I finished. Right. And so like understanding that, like, not saying, because I've seen that too, where it's like, oh, well, you're you're doing 9 minutes in one. That's too much running. And it's like, no, everybody's different, but you have to know. Now, if I try to do that I would kill myself because that wouldn't work. But you have to figure out like, where is your energy? Where is your flow? What is your capacity? And then like adjust for that.
Yeah. And it totally depends on, as you said, it depends on the situation. It depends on the day sometimes.
100%.
I learned really quickly. I haven't been speaking in public in a long time with COVID, but when I would go and speak at events, I would always like to kind of mingle and just like feel out who my audience is and like who, what the other speakers are saying. And then I would go and I would speak and then I would come off the stage. And then of course, everybody would want to talk to me. And then I'd be like talking, and like by the time I got home, when we talk about meeting our family, I was like, I don't want to talk to no one. My brain is fried. Like,
Yes.
Of course my family would be like, oh my God, if they weren't there, they were like, how was it? How did it go? Tell me all about it. Like all excited. I'm like, I'm talked out. I'm like, just this emotional, like, ooh, I was just drained.
Yeah.
And now I realize I have to set limits on how much I talk before my actual talk. And then I don't really talk to people. Like I go and take a break and recenter myself. And then I kind of like reemerge and come out and talk to people. Like I go off the stage first, center myself, grab some water, grab a little snack, refocus. And then I'm good to go out and mingle. And because everybody wants to tell you their story and their experience or what was so impactful for them. And you want to be fully present and energized for them. But I just realized that everyone's like, oh, you're such an extrovert. I'm like, yes. And I'm an extrovert, but I need to be introverted sometimes and go in my little cave and recharge to be able to come back out. And where other people, it doesn't matter. They could be out and about, yipping and talking everywhere, everything, and they're great, right? So it really depends on the person and the situation. And I love that you shed light with that marathon story. So beautifully said and great perspective. So what is the future looking like for you? What do you got exciting going on in 2022?
So many things. Well, like a lot of people, the last couple of years, there's been some huge challenges for me. And part of it is the hiring piece, like having therapists move on and not being able to hire. So that transitions a lot. But I know at the beginning, so my podcast used to be called My Biz Bestie.
Yeah.
And this last year, I rebranded it. It's called The Easily Distracted Entrepreneur. Because I work with a lot of ADHD or ADHD-ish people. Frankly, this last 2 years, I have so many people who are like, I don't have ADHD, but it's so hard to focus. So like, that's my thing. That's probably my number one favorite thing that I'm doing and really focusing on is supporting people with, helping them with the emotional side of things, the systems, the psychological understanding of how to focus and not burn themselves out. So to stop struggling for success, that's kind of my passion. And so I have a membership that I work with people in. And yeah, I think every day that I get to do that, I'm just stoked. So for me, it's about doing less. So I jokingly, I've always been the FOMO, all the things person. And I remember when people would say I would ask like people I really look up to in business, their opinion. And it would always be like, well, you've got to focus on this one thing. And I would get so like, no, I refuse to focus on one thing. So much so now though, I'm like the opposite. And so I actually host workshops called Your One Thing, based kind of on the book and essentialism. Because I realized like forever, it was like, no. I need to do all the things. I'm like, you just can't do them all at once. And so yes, I'm like, so I just need to do this. And this is where my energy is. So 2022 is all about helping easily distracted entrepreneurs and, which is pretty much all of us.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that you said it that way. I remember Chalene Johnson. I don't know if you follow her.
Yes.
Yeah. I love her. Right. She was saying, think about school. And when you learned, you had one subject per period. Like first it was math. Then it was English. You weren't trying to learn math and English and arts and science and social studies all in 1 hour. Like you can do all the things, but you can't do them all at once. And she was with like writing books, and like she does it per quarter. Like she's like, this quarter, I'm going to write my book. And then next quarter, I'm going to work on my keynote speeches. And then next quarter, like she's like, you can do all the things, you just can't do them at the same time. So I love that you said that.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I mean, I know her, of course, and like I kind of like know her trajectory because and recently she's been talking about her ADHD.
Yes.
I did not know she did the quarter thing, so I do them, they're quarterly goal planning workshops. And I'm like, because it makes sense. You need it to be long enough to accomplish something, but short enough to stay focused. Otherwise it's so easy to, do all of the things there. And I love helping people with their shiny object syndrome. That's what it's what it is. I was like the queen of shiny objects. I'm a professional squirrel chaser. I'm an ADHD I'm an ENFP with ADHD. Like I love that, but I resist now.
Yeah. And again, it's flipping that mindset in that, people will ask me like, well, is this thing going to work? And my answer is always, if you work it, it will work. Like whatever you work will work. If you get shiny object syndrome and you work on one thing for a week and this next thing for a month and this next thing for 3 days and this next thing for 2 months, no, none of that is going to work because you haven't given it long enough. When you pick the one thing and you work it, it works. So I love
absolutely.
Ooh, okay. So I will make sure I got your Facebook, your Instagram, your LinkedIn, your website. I will make sure that I get all of that in the show notes so people know about your membership and how they can contact you if they have ADHD or squirrel brain or they get easily distracted and they just need to rein it in and focus. Listeners, Amber is your lady. And knowing that this emotional side that we talked about is totally normal. If nothing else, I hope this podcast was validating for you so that you're thinking that you're not the only one who's having these struggles or these, things that pop up in business. It's totally normal. And we got you. You're never alone. So you can reach out to me. You can reach out to me. You've got community. You've got support. Amber, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yes, it was great. And, just as a last thing, if people are in that place where a lot of us are, right, I still have to control myself. I still have to assess. That's part of my whole thing. It's like assess, discern, develop your plan. I have this downloadable that amberhawley.com/Lisa. And it's all about helping you discern whether something is shiny object or an awesome opportunity. So I wanted to gift that to your guests, or your listeners, I should say. And if they're looking to kind of help them with their own shiny object, they can.
Heck yeah. Thank you. That's so generous and so helpful. Because as you said, even if you don't have ADHD, we've all been reassessing, what exactly am I doing here? Is this the right thing for me? And, was I going to go back to is this really working for me? Yes or not? Is this the right yes? Exactly. So that's such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful guide. mybizbestie.com/Lisa. Is that what you said?
No, it's so I think you must have got old information. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no.
It's amberhawley.com/Lisa.
amberhawley.com, listeners.
Yes. Sorry about that.
No worries. I will make sure that we get the right amberhawley.com/Lisa, that we get that.
Yes.
Show notes. We get all your updated. I will check with you and make sure. Don't worry.
Sorry.
No worries. I will make sure that we get the right stuff for Amber so that you can contact her. And listeners, thank you for being here today. I know that as I am easily distracted, and you sat through it and you listened, and I hope you took notes, and I hope you'll come back to this. I hope you'll come back to this and realize that you can reassess, right? You can manage your energy. You can say no. You can fire and hire until you find the right person, right? Yeah. Leave open that space for those conversations and be good to yourself. Be good to yourself. You deserve it. You've earned it. And yeah, thanks for being here. I'll see you next time on the Lisa Pezik Show.
You've been listening to the Lisa Pezik Show. Let's connect more at www.lisapezik.com.